All right, moving on now to number 6, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. It got a 90 on Rooster Teeth. What the hell's RT? Rotten Tomatoes, and a 79 on Metacritic. So this is a movie that did pretty well critically, and it made about 72.6 million the opening weekend. So people love this movie, and everything I've heard about it says it is really, I'm gonna say, unappreciated. Like it did well, but we all think it could have done better. I also heard, I have full disclosure, I didn't see the movie. Did any of you see the movie?
I really wanted to,
Yeah.
Yeah, I never actually
but
made it
it
there.
hit. It came out here during a bad patch in my personal schedule, and just, I had no time.
But really, there's no surprise that this hit number 6, because the first one was really successful as well, and the team behind it seems to know what they're doing. So we let's give them a golf clap.
Yeah. Oh, also, interesting side note: there have apparently been a number of public spats that have come up between Andy Serkis and a lot of the animating teams that he works with
Really?
about
What do you
who
mean?
should really up the what
What do you mean?
in terms of who should get credit for the character, who should get more credit for the realistic appearance of the character Circus plays, Circus's performance, or the budgets and the hard work of the animating teams. Because
Can't
there
we
have
give credit
been
to both of them?
the what?
Why can't we just give credit to both of them? Why does one person have to get the both?
Well, because it's easier for people to have one name in their heads and a name of an actor, and not okay the 50,000 people slaving away in the FX labor mines.
Yeah. Anyone who's
So
anyone who's half intelligent knows, though, there's a whole lot of things behind any of his, like, Gollum performance. It's not just
yeah,
him,
but
although
most major moviegoers are not.
yeah, most major
Remember,
anything.
wait till we get to number one on this list, people.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not dealing with academia here.
No, no, none of these are very academic movies. Which leads us, though, to number 5, Days of Future Past. Probably the most complicated one on this list. With it not
Ah,
the most complicated
ah.
one on this list. They're not very complicated.
All
But
right.
You know, yeah.
go ahead.
I will say one of the things I did appreciate about the movie is even though there is action in it, it doesn't. Ultimately, the climax of this movie is all psychological. It's all in
Yeah.
convincing someone to do something or convincing someone not to do something. It's all in the choice and not in the fight scene. So I do appreciate that, even though there is a substantial amount of action in Days of Future
Yeah.
Past. And
That's
I
a
was
great
very
point.
surprised by that. It was a pleasant surprise for me. I really did like it.
Also, for said climax, they actually literally hurl Wolverine off screen.
Yes, that was
They're
fun.
like, nope, voom, get out.
Speaking though, Justin, that's a great point. I mean, this was an action scene, but I think one scene I'm thinking of that kind of ties into what you said. The scene at the end where the Sentinels break in to Kitty, and I mean, it's tense not because they're fighting. The moment I'm talking about, right? Where he's like
Yeah, yeah.
shooting that
Yeah.
beam, and it's like slowly inching closer to her.
Yep.
That was so tense. I remember sitting there like, I know they're gonna survive, but I'm like, oh no, are they gonna make it? But it wasn't like a straightforward fight scene. So I really do think you're absolutely right. They combined everyone's favorite fighting with the more psychological thriller and even mind twisting kind of time travel-ish stuff. I mean, I was in a lot of conversations with people about where they had questions about, like, how did this time travel? But how did time travel? How did but the time travel, dude? Don't you get time travel?
Yeah.
So they really didn't pull any punches when it comes
Because
to.
time travel. But no, what I also really appreciate about the movie was, I get that X Men has had its ups and downs,
Mostly
and
ups, I like to think. It had one down.
mostly ups. But I know people are also a little divided over, the first two Singer movies. A lot of people feel that they aren't necessarily great comic book movies. They're certainly not on the level of, Nolan's Batman trilogy.
Well,
But
I
still,
mean,
like,
to be fair, they were the ones that launched the whole comic book franchise. They,
well, that's the point that a lot of critics like Movie Bob have made. Like when the first X-Men came out, it was like, oh my God, it's not Batman and Robin.
right.
It's not shit.
And it's also
And that
14
was,
years old now. So, I mean, so they didn't age
but
very
but
well.
here's But here's the thing, actually, no, despite the age, I still, like, on a personal level, I still really like the first two Singer movies, just because I watched them a ton when I was a kid. So there's actually a lot of, like, those two movies, like, separate from their quality, they have a lot of nostalgia value for me.
Yeah.
Even though I do recognize that they have problems, and I get why fans of the comic books are not very crazy with how they treat characters like Cyclops.
Oh, yeah, Cyclops was done so poorly. I wished he was dead still at the end of this last movie. The fact that they brought him back made me like, oh, I have to.
They're apologizing. They're apologizing.
Honestly, I thought the actor died, so I was really upset when I saw him on screen.
Wait, you thought he died?
Marsden was dead?
For some reason, I thought he was dead.
Casey, a lot of actors are dying this year, but still, man. But no, so like the movies have a lot of nostalgic value, and to that end, this movie, I mean, partly because it was directed by Bryan Singer, you know, felt like one of the older X-Men movies, and of course, it has, you know, still the remainders of the original cast.
Which I think is the reason it did as well as it did, because as you're saying, the X-Men brand is getting a little stale. I don't think First Class did extremely well, but because
it got good reviews. It got a good reception.
I love that First Class. It's my favorite X-Men movie, but like I can see that people think it's getting a little stale. So they had to revamp it, and I think the fact that Singer was in to bring both the old classics back with the new really pushed it up to 5. I personally think it could have done better than it did. I think because it was stale, it didn't do as well as it could have. But that's my 2 cents.
Also, one day Hugh Jackman really will be too old to play Wolverine.
He says 2 more movies and he's done. Although he said 1 more movie, and now it's at 2. So anyway,
I mean, I will say that one of the pleasures of this movie for me definitely was seeing not just seeing Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen come back, but seeing them along with the 2 younger actors playing their younger selves. And the eerie thing was seeing little quirks, little ways they would say something. I'm talking about James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. Little ways they say that would remind you of Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. It was a little eerie in a really good way. Mm-hmm. I really do think, like, honestly, those 4 actors for me were a huge reason why the film worked for me.
You know, while we're talking about
not
actors,
Mystique.
Exactly.
Her
performance in this movie was like.
She looked bored.
She looked bored. Oh man, Jennifer Lawrence, come on. We know you can do better.
She's like, I signed this contract before Hunger Games became a success, and I could demand any check I wanted. Also, I'm an Oscar winner for some reason.
It just doesn't make any sense to me, because you see what James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender are doing, and they're bigger movie stars. I mean, this probably isn't like their most anticipated project. At least I wouldn't think so. But they still, like, you can tell there's such a passion for acting there. And with Jennifer Lawrence in this movie, it's just like she's sleepwalking through everything.
And it's really worrying me. It's really worrying me because, like, we finally got a bit of her older acting stuff back in Catching Fire, but I still, the last 2. Crap, what's his name? What the fuck is his name? Wow, I've even forgotten his name. The movies for which he was nominated for the Oscars.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Russell, all hail the Russell.
Russell.
Yeah, no, just those. David Russell, the guy who did.
David O. Russell. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and American Hustle. Those 2 movies, and now the two X-Men movies. And I'm just like, come on, girl.
Well, okay, here's the difference between those 2. I mean, X-Men was written well. I mean, they wrote her into this movie. They really wanted her to be a big part of it. But then she showed up and was like, I don't really want to be here. The other way around, though, American Hustle, that was just poor writing. I mean, she gave it her all. I think she had a really strong performance in it. But I think that the writing and the direction in it were a little.
She was out of her depth.
I gotta be honest, she was totally miscast in that movie. Like,
but honestly,
I thought she was the most overrated.
She tried. She definitely tried. That's at least what I got.
That's the thing. That actually makes.
Okay, that's a good point. You're making a distinction between here. She's clearly phoning it in, sleepwalking through it, as opposed to American Hustle, where it does seem like she is trying. So yeah, that is something. But it's just a shame for me because the first place I ever saw her was Winter's Bone, where she's great. And I said, wow, this actress has such promise. And then everything I've seen since has just been a real letdown for me. It's kind of.
But no, and that's for me. X-Men is the biggest disappointment because Mystique was one of the coolest characters in the original Singer movies. Every time Mystique appeared, you were like, oh, shit is getting real.
Yeah.
And here it's like, oh, hey, Mystique's
Even
back.
in the comics.
Now can we go back to Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen?
Anyway,